Yeah, well, as you saw yesterday, the Hereditary Peers bill went
Yes.
through, and yeah, the Conservatives. Yes, could you speak about your uh, ideas about that, and do you agree
Yes,
with the
sure.
bill?
So the Centre for Small State Conservatives, we've published a whole series of different ideas, all of them, as the name might suggest, around trying to work out how you deliver a smaller state in a way which is humane and creates a dynamic economy, but also a society that's good to live in. And one of the things that we've suggested, and there's a whole range of other things to do with tax policy and benefits policy and all those other things. But one of the ideas that we've come up with is something which we call an aristocracy of talent. And that is saying, look, the honours system as it currently stands isn't quite as meritocratic as it perhaps could be. And in fact, if your viewers ask themselves, do I actually think that the honours system is for people like me? Am I likely, if I become incredibly successful, to be given some kind of an honor and recognition? And quite a lot of people think, well, it doesn't really matter how successful or not successful I might be. Um, the chances of getting noticed in that kind of way are very small because it's kind of a magic circle. It's kind of a sort of a who you know kind of club rather than anything else. And what I think is that the honour system is a wonderful piece of our nation's heritage, but we ought to make sure that it's fit for the 21st century. We ought to update it. It ought to be really transparently meritocratic. So you know that if someone is given a knighthood or a damehood or an OBE or an MBE or anything, they are there because they've got it because they really earned it, and they deserve it. There's no favoritism. There's no mates rates or anything like that going on. And so the idea is very simple, which is to say, if we have for legal immigration in this country, we have a points-based system. So if you're a brain surgeon, you get given lots and lots of points and you're eligible to get a visa. If you are less skilled, perhaps you don't get quite as many. But if we have a points-based system for uh, identifying and then admitting the brightest and best people who want to come and live in Britain from around the rest of the world, if we can spot with points-based system who those brightest and best people are if they're foreigners, why can't we do it for ourselves here, for Brits here at home? And so if you apply the same basic idea of a points-based system, you could have the same thing to work out whether or not you, Harry, are eligible for a knighthood or an OBE or whatever it might be. And if you're not yet, you could work out what else you'd have to do in order to get enough points to become eligible at some point in your future career. And it would be that everybody would know that if they're successful, they'll get recognized. Um, and they'll also know that if they meet somebody who has got some sort of an honor, they're talking to someone pretty special because they have earned it and there's no question about it, and they have it because they deserve it.
What sort of things would contribute to the points, do you think?
So we'd have to have a sort of national debate to sort of refine this, but in principle, if you want to recognize the best doctors, the best teachers, the best business people, the best philanthropists, then you come up with some rather straightforward, basic ideas. If you want to spot the best philanthropists, well, who's given the most money each year for the last 5 years, 10 years, however long it is, and you could do that either in terms of absolute pounds given or in terms of percentage of their wealth. And that's the sort of thing you need to discuss. Ditto for business people. Who has run the biggest, most complicated organizations and successfully and grown them and built them for the maximum number of years? Or if you're talking about entrepreneurs, who has created the most wealth from scratch, compared to all their peers? You can work this stuff out, and you could say to people, you can be nominated by anybody. So if I thought you were worth nominating for a knighthood, I could say, well, Harry does the following things, and therefore he ought to have this many points, and that should give him an OBE. And then at that point, someone will say, all right, well, that looks reasonable. We'll just check to make sure that John Penrose isn't making stuff up about Harry and lying in order to get his mate through the over the hurdle. But those will be the kind of things that you look at, and teachers will be, the people who run the biggest and most successful schools for the longest period of time. Those sorts of things. But it ought to be transparent. It ought to be easily checkable, just that everybody knows that it's valid.
And would you include peers into that?
Well, so I would, but I think that what you've got to do first is you've got to disentangle the honour of being given a peerage from the constitutional question about who goes into the upper house to have a say in the way our laws are made. And the difficulty at the moment is that those two things are both sort of put together. So I would make getting a peerage as part of the honours system, but I would say if you want to put somebody into the upper house of Parliament, let's call them something else. Let's not call them my lord or my lady. That will be for people who have earned an honour. If you want to put in somebody because you think that they're going to be a brilliant legislator in the upper house, let's call them, I don't know, senator or alderman or alderwoman or whatever it might be instead. Give them a different title. You can then decide if you want to reform the upper house of Parliament or not. But that's kind of a separate point. And if we end up with their lordships, Lords reform being mixed up with honours reform, that it becomes all of a sudden a problem which is 2, 3, 4 times the size and much more complicated. So let's separate the two out. Let's reform the honours first. Let's call members of the upper house something different. And if you want to have Lords reform, that's fine, but come back and do it later.